I drive to what I thought was the Historical Society. It's this huge building, okay?
Okay.
Now, I wasn't planning on going there, okay? So I'm in sweatpants and, like, a baggy sweatshirt. Like, I'm not dressed for the part. I'm literally just following the trail, right? Like, people that are pointing me in directions.
It's like a sort of municipal building?
Yeah.
Sort of thing? Okay.
Well, kind of. So I'm getting to that.
Okay.
So I walk into this massive building, and there's like security guards there and stuff, and I'm like, hey, I'm looking for stuff about like property or like records, and they're like, yep, second floor, go to this room. I walk in this room, and there's like 4 ladies. It's like a U, and they're sitting behind their desks, and they all look at me like I am. Dude, people were walking around in suits and stuff. I'm like, I don't feel right. Like, I don't feel right in here. And they're like, what can I help you with? They said, well, I'm looking for, like, records on property. And they're like, yeah, this is records. And I'm like, well, I'm looking for, like, Ed Gein's property. And they're like, oh. They're like, are you looking for, like news stuff and, like, other things? And I'm like, yeah, like, is there a back room that I can go to? And they're like, well, actually, this is not the Historical Society. Oh. This is the county courthouse.
Oh, okay.
And they're like, it's actually right across next door. It's a tiny building, which I thought, okay, like that makes sense. So now I'm walking with my tail between my legs because I look like an idiot going through there. So I look on the door, dude, so I walk, it's literally the same parking lot. So I walk across the parking lot, and it's this old rickety house, okay? Looking thing, and it's 2 stories, and I knock on the door, and the sign says that they're open on Wednesdays from like 8 to 5, and then like a Friday and Saturday. So I got lucky that I came on the one day that they're open. Mm-hmm. So nothing happens, but I knock on the door creaks open. So okay. So I go walking up the stairs, and I turn in the room. And there's this old dude in there. He looks like a skeleton. Like, the guy needs to eat. Super nice guy, though. He's like, how can I help you? I'm like, I've driven a long way. I'm looking for, do you have stuff on, like, a property? And he said, how far do you drive? I'm like, well, in total, like 5 hours. He's like, are you looking for Ed?
Yeah, of course.
And I said, yes, I am. He said, right this way. So he takes me downstairs, and I'm like, do you want me to, like, pay you or something? Like, is this like a... He's like, oh, I'll give you a free tour later. I was the only one in this building.
Probably the only one there that month.
Literally.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, don't worry about it, dude. Like, I'll give you a free tour. And I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, but first I'll show you, like, downstairs. So I walk in this room, and... It's probably about twice the size of the room we're in right now, and it has just books upon books everywhere on the shelves. Okay, it's about 4 stacks, 4 levels of shelving. There is one point on the shelf that is clearly labeled Ed Gein, and there's about 6 books on there. So he walked me over to the shelf, and he said, "This one's all the transcripts from his court trial." This one is all the photos that were taken when the police came to his property. This is photos of him. This is like some other like police filing charges and stuff. So anyway, I take the book out and I sit down and I'm looking through it and I'm reading, dude, these transcripts, they have every single word he said in court, everything like that. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Like I felt like I was in the courtroom. And so then I kind of got bored because at that point it was kind of just like more or less his lawyer talking. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really him because he wasn't deemed fit per se to talk, right? So then I go to the photos, okay? So I open the photos up, and man, was it messed up. Like, there was...
The police photos of the house.
Yeah, so when the police finally figured out that it was him and he was busted, they end up taking him out of his house, and when they start, like, going through the house, they're realizing, like, there are things here that are not normal. So, like, in the fridge, they found, like, jars of teeth and other things in there that were just like not what a normal person would have, like body parts in jars. And then they found lampshades with skin. Some of the light poles were like made out of arms and legs to like hold up the light bulb. Some of the bedding was made out of human that he had. The house was in disarray, obviously. He didn't take care of it. And there was a shed. Unfortunately, there was a shed with a woman hanging upside down, essentially gutted like a deer in the shed that they found. And they later found out that it was one of the women that he recently grave robbed. So she was already dead when he had gotten her. That's why Ed, like I said, he did kill for sure 2 people, but a lot of his infamy was the grave robbing stuff. So, but yes, they found faces. So like he'd cut off their faces and wear their face, which if this sounds familiar to anybody, a lot of people don't know this, but Ed Gein was actually the original, what do you call it? The original thought on the movie Leatherface or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So he is the original person that the director thought of making after somebody, because Leatherface wears people's faces. That's what they do. He cuts their skin off and stuff like that. So that's where that came from. And Ed's nickname is also the Butcher of Plainfield as well. So anyway, they found a necklace of like nipples, human faces cut off. I mean, you name it, like all these body parts were being used.
And the lady that was hanging like a deer, that might come from the fact that it's like a big hunting community. And so everybody there kind of knows how to, and he was a farmhand as well, right?
Yep.
So like he kind of knows how to butcher animals and like, take the organs out and preserve bodies of animals. And so he applied those same skills to humans.
Yeah. So I'm looking through all these photos, and some of it was just kind of like an overview of the property. There wasn't really a lot. But what's interesting is in the photos, like you could tell which room was his mom's room because it was like completely untouched, like in the photos. The bed was made. Everything was perfect. Like it was just so interesting to like still think that after all the things he did, like that was like his God. Like he worshiped his mom, And so, after I was looking at the photos, I really just kind of took it all in, and I'm like, wow, like I can absolutely see how Ed's name is like a stain on that city, Plainfield, And so I closed the book, and I'm like, I go back upstairs, and I'm like, so you got more for me? And he's like, oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So he walks me through into this jail area, and I thought that they had like this, like they made this for the like a museum type. No. The Historical Society was actually the original courthouse. So this was the jail, and it was also part of a train station. So he brings me in this room, and there was a bench there, and he's like, that third seat, that's where Ed was brought when he was arrested. He was in this room, this exact room, untouched, all the original seating and everything. And he said that's where he sat when he was originally brought in and had to be charged and all this other stuff. Then he took me to the cell that Ed was in. And in the cell, they have a life-size cutout of him. He's very small. He's like 5'5", 5'6". He's really not that tall. Life-size cutout. And in there, they have a dresser with some of the actual belongings from his house. So there's a butcher knife that they have in there that was part of the crime scene that they believed cut up bodies. There was plates, other like switchblades, and I think there was a gun in there, like a rifle in there as well, all confiscated from his house, including the dresser. So he's like, everything in this dresser is original. This is all his. He touched every single item in here. They wouldn't let me touch anything, obviously, but I was getting a free tour, so I wasn't going to complain.
Really quick, the jail cells, get more or less comfortable over the years?
More, for sure.
Oh, so like now, if you're going to jail now, you're having a better experience
Absolutely.
than what he had?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I thought it'd been the opposite.
No. Much better now. So, in fact, I don't even think there was a toilet in this jail cell.
Oh, wow.
So, anyway, so he takes me through there. He takes me through the rest of it. Some of it's like they had a doctor's office there, obviously, and just like some other basic stuff. So then and this is kind of, I'll have a little touch on Halloween here in a second. So he takes me upstairs and he walks me to this wall. And on the wall is like this sliding door with a handle. You can slide it up. And I'm like, what's that? He's like, well, believe it or not, this courthouse was also half of a house. So on the other side of that wall was the sheriff's house. And every night, his wife would make the meals for the inmates. So when she would make the food, she would slide it through the pass, and the the deputies would give the inmates food for the night. I'm like, wow, that's really cool. And he's like, we have a lot of people come here looking for Ed. And he said, what's your backstory? Like, what brings you here? And I'm like, well, I'm a cop. And I'm curious to think, like, why he did things the way he did. And he's like, he died in a mental facility. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, did you go to his graveyard yet? I said, I did. There's no headstone. He said, yeah. He's like, we used to have the headstone here, one of them that they remade, but we don't have it anymore. I think they either sold it or they did something with it, send it to a different museum or something. And basically, he's like, did they tell you how he was buried? And I said, no. And he's like, well, he's buried like 10 feet down. So they purposely buried him deeper than your typical 6 feet because they wanted him to be closer to hell. And they also buried him in like 3 feet of concrete, just like his mom. And he said part of that was the soil, he said. But also, he said the town didn't want anybody attempting to grave rob his body and essentially idolize him. And he said it's the same case with why there's no tombstone anymore, because they just gave up and they're like, we're not going to keep making a tombstone for, people keep stealing it. I'm like, well, that's really interesting. And so this is kind of where we get to a little bit of the Halloween stuff as well. So, as I go walking down the stairs, the second flight of stairs, because this is where the pass was in the jail. It's 2 stories. And I thought he was joking with me, but he's like, yeah. He's like, that my female coworker down there? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, yeah, she's not allowed to come up here. And I like chuckled. Like, I'm like, oh, that's strange. Like, this isn't like women's suffrage. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what the deal is there. And I'm like, he could tell I was like kind of uncomfortable with that comment. Yeah. Like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, the reason why she can't come up here is because of the ghosts. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm like, can you like articulate more? And he's like, yeah. He's like, the second floor of this jail, he said, is extremely haunted. And he said, for some reason, like, females get attacked up here all the time. He said scratches. One's been pushed down the stairs. And he said it's always females. He said for some reason, and he said you can go talk to her. He said she's been attacked before and she won't go up here anymore.